Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the hidden forces that shape our romantic lives. We're talking about everything from those patterns we just can't seem to shake to the tools we can actually use to build way healthier connections.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with a question that I'm sure has crossed your mind. Why do some of us crave closeness like air, while others seem to need a ton of space? Why do we keep falling into the same kind of relationship over and over again?
Well, it turns out the answer isn't random at all. It actually goes back to this really powerful psychological framework that was developed way back in the 1960s by researchers John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And honestly, it completely changed how we understand love.
It's called attachment theory. And the whole idea is that our very first bonds, with our parents or caregivers, they create a kind of blueprint for all of our future relationships. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it our internal working model.
And here's the crucial part. These models, the ones formed when we were kids, they become our internal compass for adult romance. They shape our beliefs about whether we're even worthy of love and what we can expect from other people. And yeah, you can recalibrate that compass, but for the most part, it tends to stay pretty stable over time.
So how does this blueprint actually show up in our lives? Well, it tends to build out into 4 pretty distinct patterns or styles of attachment. And then in the 1980s, a couple of researchers, Cindy Hazen and Philip Shaver, took this theory and applied it to adult romance, which basically gave us a map to understand ourselves.
Now, what's so cool about this chart is how it breaks everything down along 2 simple lines. First, your view of yourself. Like, deep down, do you feel worthy of love? And second, your view of others. Do you see them as trustworthy and reliable? Where you land on this grid pretty much determines your attachment style.
First up, right in that top left corner, you've got the secure style. This is when you have a positive view of both yourself and other people. These are the folks who got the memo that yes, they are worthy and yes, other people can generally be counted on. This right here, this comfort with both intimacy and independence is the absolute hallmark of the secure style. They can get close to someone without losing who they are, and they tend to handle conflict pretty constructively. It's often seen as, the gold standard for healthy relationships.
Okay, next up we have the anxious preoccupied style. This one combines a negative view of yourself with a positive view of others. And what that creates is this dynamic where you desperately crave connection but often feel really insecure once you have it. So these individuals are looking for a ton of intimacy and approval, but they're often doubting their own worth in the relationship. They can become hyper-aware of any little sign of distance from their partner, which, can sometimes lead to behaviors that accidentally push that person away. Our third style is dismissive avoidant. This is where you have a positive view of yourself, but a negative view of others. They see themselves as strong and self-sufficient, but they tend to see other people as unreliable or maybe even too needy. These folks really value their independence, almost like they're creating a protective bubble around themselves. They tend to push down their feelings and avoid really deep attachment. For them, getting too close emotionally can feel like a threat to their freedom, so they often keep their partners at arm's length. And finally, we have the fearful avoidant style. This is sometimes called disorganized attachment, and it's marked by a negative view of both yourself and others. This one is definitely the most complex style, kind of like a mix of anxious and avoidant traits all rolled into one.
With this style, you have this real desire for closeness that's unfortunately all mixed up with a deep fear of it, and it often comes from some kind of past trauma or loss. They want love, but they're also terrified of being hurt, which leads to this really confusing push-pull dynamic in their relationships.
So, knowing your style is the why, right? It explains your gut reactions and your instincts. But now, let's talk about the practical how. Let's talk about the essential tool of boundaries, which is what lets you manage your attachment style in a healthy way. You can think of boundaries as the user interface for your attachment style. And they're not walls to keep people out. They're the rules you set for how you want to interact with others in a way that feels safe and respectful for you.
And the difference they make is just night and day. Without them, you're on a fast track to feeling overwhelmed, taken for granted, or just plain resentful. But with them, you build self-respect, and you teach other people how to treat you. Boundaries are basically the bridge from resentment to respect.
Communicating them effectively is a real skill, though. It's all about expressing your needs clearly without making the other person feel blamed. Using I statements like, I feel overwhelmed when we text all day is so much more effective than saying, you text too much. It's about owning what you need, not controlling what they do.
Okay, so now that we have the internal tools, let's look at an external idea that is all over online conversations these days, the concept of the high-value partner. This idea doesn't really focus on attachment or boundaries. Instead, it tries to create a kind of checklist for what makes someone a desirable partner.
So what even is a high-value man or woman? Well, depends who you ask because you get wildly different answers. The term itself is super vague, and that kind of seems to be the point. On one hand, you've got a perspective that's often tied to online red pill communities, and it defines value by external stuff, money, status, looks. But then, a lot of other people argue that true value is all about internal character traits. It's kind of interesting. You can almost see how someone with a dismissive avoidance style might lean toward that checklist on the left, while a secure person would probably care a lot more about the traits on the right.
And this comment from an online discussion just perfectly highlights the contradictions in that more superficial definition. If, like this user points out, showing care is seen as lowering a man's value, it kind of suggests the whole framework isn't actually about building a healthy partnership at all. The cruelty becomes the point. And all of this brings us to one last big thought to leave you with. After understanding our own attachment styles and how important boundaries are, maybe the most valuable thing isn't about getting a high score on some checklist. Maybe it's something way simpler and yet much harder to achieve. A secure connection, one that's built on trust, respect, and a real understanding of each other's blueprint.